Hello and welcome. My name is Ateo, and today we're going to be looking at a replay review of Caki. Now, Caki is like a brand new player. He's been playing about a week and does not have outside RTS experience. So this video is going to be geared up or talked about with that in mind. So let's jump into it and see what Caki does. I did not take notes on this one. This one I'm just kind of doing raw. Um, So I've not seen this replay beforehand whatsoever. Okay, so right away here, I'm going to talk about the resources a little bit. So I don't know if you've played games that have resources, like an RTS does. But in an RTS, the resources are, they're a big deal. They help you produce the units in order to achieve your end goal, which ultimately is to destroy all commanders in this game. In other RTSs, it might be like destroy all buildings or something like that. And you achieve that through using your resources and trying to get as many resources as you can so that you can spend more on an army to kill your opponents with eventually. With that in mind, RTSs that have the total annihilation lineage, that kind of came from that original Total Annihilation game in 1997. They use metal and energy, or in some cases like Supreme Commander, they use mass and energy. The idea being, you gather the metal to build the blocks of these units with, and then you give them life with energy. And in that way, you can build everything. And I will say, energy is a lot easier to get. You can just build a solar or wind, so like wherever you want, and get that energy. Whereas metal or mass, you have to build on these spots, and it's harder to get the metal generally speaking, unless you're playing a metal map or something like that. So with that in mind, you want to grab the metal around you as soon as possible early on. So what that means is, while you still have some energy, you don't really need this wind turbine. You can delay it a little bit to get this metal sooner. So a very common opening, or actually first I should mention that wind turbines, they take a bit of energy and a little bit of metal. They're fairly cheap, right? And then you have your solar, which costs only metal, no energy. So what you can actually do is with that initial 1,000 energy is you can make 2 extractors. And I don't know if you know this or not, but your commander also produces a little bit of metal and energy. It produces 2 metal and 25 energy. Since it's building, it also shows what it's using up at the time as well. So given that it produces a little bit, you start with a little bit of plus energy and plus metal. And so by the time you build a couple of extractors, you'll still have at least 500 energy. And with that, you can actually build a 3rd metal. But if you do that, you're not going to have you're not going to have energy to produce any wind turbines. And since metal extractors also take a little bit of energy every second, your energy bar will not fill up very quickly at all. And so you're going to want to produce some energy. Now, if you start with 3 mexes, mex being metal extractor, you won't have the energy to produce a wind efficiently. You'll basically stall and build it kind of slowly, and it'll build it as your energy slowly goes up with the little bit you get from your commander. So if you do 3 metal build, you want to get a solar first before winds. If you're going to do like 3 metal in a row like that. The other way to do it is to grab 2 metal, a wind turbine, and then your 3rd metal. Or if you're trying to rush, you can also do things like grab 2 metal, build 3 winds, and then build your factory. So here it looks like you're grabbing a metal, 2 wind turbines, another mex, and then your factory. And this isn't going to be quite enough energy for it. and you could grab the two mechs sooner. And I would also not recommend, like if you're going to go vehicles, I would recommend grabbing your third metal extractor. The reason being is vehicles take more energy or more sorry, more metal than they do energy compared to bots. So vehicles are more metal intensive and bots are more energy intensive. So it's quite important to grab that third mechs if you're going to do vehicle as an opener. So yeah, just a little bit of rearrangements, like if I were to try to keep this build as close as it is right now, I would suggest doing metal extractor, 3 wind turbines, and then the lab. And if wind like gets super low, you might need a fourth or a fifth even if it gets really low. But generally it's around 3. If wind is super good, you could get away with 2, but that'd be on a map where like the max is like 20 or something like that. Whereas here it's 2 to 14 with an average speed of 10.5. Really good to hover over this too if you haven't. Suggest notes that wind is more efficient than metal in terms of metal cost anyway. When the wind speed is below 5 for Armada or 6 for Cortex. Little things like that will help a lot because eventually, you can produce a lot of wind. So let's speed up just a little bit. So here you're going to run out of energy, and to produce out of here, you won't really have enough. Actually, wind is quite high right now, so it might be mostly okay. We'll see. But yeah, your metal storage is already like starting to get pretty low. Yeah, so now you're producing a unit and getting those wins, and you're just stalling a little bit to do that. If you stall hard enough, certain things cost energy to maintain, like these metal extractors. So if your energy gets too low, these metal extractors actually turn off, and then all of a sudden you're not making that metal either. So it's actually quite important to try to fix this if you can. So let's see, what are you producing? A blitz right away, and then some constructors. Fairly reasonable. The blitz can help you defend. And also, like if you really wanted, you could send it out scouting, but I would say you would want the light scout vehicles instead, the rovers here, if you were to do that. Yeah, so now you're getting this third mechs, and you are, okay, grabbing the sentry. So this sentry, I would say, if you're going to get a sentry, try to place it more centralized, like around here, because it'll be able to attack everything within, like, well, it's a bad circle, but you get the idea. Like it has it includes more of your base, whereas this red circle here of where it currently is, like it hits the very outsides of your buildings here, but a scout or a blitz or something could just park here and destroy that mechs and these, and then it could even park like over here and probably shoot some of these as well. So these could actually all die as well. And then this one, I mean, it could also park here and kill this mechs. And I would also say if you're going to get a blitz this early, you don't really need this tower yet. Of course, then you have to rely on responding very quickly to, an enemy scout coming in. So just, something to keep in mind. Also, your commander does really nice damage too. It's actually better than the blitz and the tower. 187 DPS with its laser, and then this tower only has 160, and this blitz only has 90. Not that scouts require a lot of damage. They die very quickly, but the commander also shoots very quickly as well. So, and has a reasonable range. So you can actually defend your entire base if he's standing in the middle of it. And then I would suggest a tower or something like that as your commander leaves. Like, because ultimately, it's an RTS where you want to get resources, and in this RTS, and in Total Annihilation RTS, RTS lineage, You have metal. One of your resources is basically all over the place, just kind of scattered around. So in order to claim those, ideally you want to control the front area. And in team game, there's 3 other people here. You only have to control a section of it. Like you don't have to control this entire. Whoops, that's a weird line. You just have to control like this area, or as much of it as you can as a team. But since you don't have to worry about your teammates as much, or you don't have to, or sorry, you don't have to worry about controlling the upper area here because your teammates will handle it. You basically need to control this section here, at the very least. Ideally, somewhere you want to control more of it. The more of it that you can, or the further, or the closer it is to that area is to your opponents, the more metal you have on your side, and the more metal that you can build extractors on, and boost your economy to get better, or first of all to get more units, but also to get better units eventually. So with that, your commander ideally, early on, he has a lot of build power to build things at base, but he also has quite a few hit points for this stage of the game, and has some good DPS with that laser, but then also has a special ability called Disintegrator Gun. People just shorten that to D gun. But you just hit D and it basically shoots a line of damage that kills literally anything except for an enemy commander. Which actually I don't even know if that's I think it still has immunity from D gun, but that's the only unit in the game that has immunity to D gun is another commander. So anyways, a bit of a tangent there, but I'm just saying your commander ideally, eventually, should move to that frontal location, grab a couple of the mexes on the way, and just help secure your front area. And ideally, like, it's the sort of thing where it's like most of the time, or what should happen most of the time anyway, is you'll move your commander out. The player on the opposite side will move their commander out as well, and you'll meet somewhere in the middle. And ideally, you want to try to meet closer to his end. You want like more of the area, but of course, the more of the area you get, the easier it is for someone else to maybe come in this way, and flank. Or some, there's other ways to get around where you are, and that could potentially kill you. So anyways, let's unpause. We'll see if you end up moving your commander out or not. But yeah, I mean, if you don't know some of that stuff, I hope I just helped enlighten like how this game is played. Okay, so here's a scout. You respond to your blitz very quickly, very nice. I would say maybe a radar, or at least a radar soon. Because if you have a radar, you know where that scout is, and now you know that there's 2 of them because you do have a radar. Okay, great. Radar, very, very important. Okay, the tower gets that one. Yeah, so overall, actually, like, you built the LT and then moved your commander out. So, like, the timing wasn't bad or anything. I was just, trying to mention that. The location, if it was more central, that would have been saved a little bit. Yeah, so you do get attacked by that scout. Alright, well, your radar sees everything in green. So you're pretty safe. You don't really need your blitz here anymore. And your ally has a radar up here, so he has some vision as well with radar. So yeah, your blitz could actually move up here to scout to where the enemy commander is. So here, this is something that's going to take some time to get used to. But ideally, you don't have that idle time with your commander there. To fix that, what you can do is just queue up stuff. Yeah, you know how to queue stuff, but just like make it a longer queue. Like, build this mech, build this tower, and then already queue up this next mechs. And after this mechs, queue up this next mechs. Or, put a tower and then, put a tower and then grab the mechs. Yeah, so this would be 1, 2, 3. And maybe even, like, I would actually suggest putting a radar here as well. Just so you can see, like, beyond where your first one is. You ideally, as you move up, and I don't know if you might do this, you might not, but just to mention, as you move up, before you reach your radar line, you want to put down another radar, and that way you can, it just helps you see ahead. Ideally, your new one would cover something like this, but then there'd be like maybe a dead zone here. Uh, but yeah, ideally it would show you more of what's in front of you so that you don't get into trouble with your commander. Uh, yeah, so here it's good that you're adding on energy. I would argue that you don't really need two constructors on it quite yet. You might later, but one is fine for now, to be honest. Like, your drain's not that high. One of the things to note about Beyond All Reason specifically, this is a little bit different than Supreme Commander, but in Beyond All Reason, things are broken down into build power. And factories, well, first of all, your commander has one of the highest build powers in the game. It has 300. Uh, here you can see, there's the cost, there's the movement stuff, and then there's build. So that's build power. So basically, when something gets built, say this blitz, it has a build cost. If you look by cost there's the metal cost first, the energy cost second, and then the green number is the build cost. That's how much build power needs to go into it. Um, so basically that number gets divided by the builders that the build power that's on it to give you an amount of time that it'll take to produce it. And things like factories, like this Armada vehicle plants, has 100 build power. So it's feeding in. That 100 build power is feeding into the unit it's producing. And factories can only you know use that build power on the unit it's producing. But you can actually assist the factory with a construction vehicle or a commander or whatever it is. Which I don't remember, but you might have been doing that already. But I guess, yeah, I'm just breaking it down quite a bit here for you in case you don't know. Um, but yeah, these construction vehicles, and by the way, I'm holding space to get this information um, on these units. You can also see some of the information down here, but just not as much of it. But anyways, one of these constructors could be assisting this lab to produce these units quicker. So instead of 100 build power being used on producing these units, you would now have 100 from the lab plus 90 from the construction vehicle. So just having one of these construction vehicles on this lab almost doubles how fast these units can pump out. And that's assuming you have the metal and the energy for it. So I would ideally do that. But I would also argue you have a lot of metal extractors not taken yet. And I would say, yeah, this is a good path from your commander. You didn't need to go down here. Don't think that you need to go down here to commander to get this metal extractor. It's more important to secure the fronts and grab those mexes. But yeah, you could have a second construction vehicle grabbing these metals, or I should say a third construction vehicle. Um, and your metal's already getting quite low, so once it runs out, uh, obviously you're not putting a lot of build power into this. You're not putting really any extra build power into this factory, but if you did, your resources drain faster. So, um, you are going to run out of metal pretty quickly here. And I think having a third constructor, having a third constructor to grab the mexes, but also like your first constructor could have been grabbing those mexes or starting to grab them, like queue them up, hit Z, place one here, place one here, place one, everywhere. And in case you don't know, you can double tap Z and get this area mex command. So again, it's ZZ, and then you can highlight an area. So for example, you can hit ZZ and then go like this. So you're it's ZZ and then left mouse drag, and you can order your constructor to go to all three of these mexes. Uh, yeah. So you can like grab this one, hold shift, do it again over here, do it again over here, and then it'll do this one as the first one, probably go to this one as the second one, third, fourth, and fifth. And then um, when it's not your commander, I would argue at the end of every queue, you should also queue in guard the factory. And that way, any idle builders, once they're done with their queue, they'll automatically return to help build stuff out of the factory. And that way, A, they're not sitting idle, and B, if you're looking for a constructor to build with, you don't have to look all over your base, like where's the idle constructor. There is an idle button and stuff you can turn on, um, but yeah, that just makes it a nice clean, like this is where my constructors are. At least the ones like in the back in my base, are here. So I can pull off however many constructors I want to go build the next thing. Um, I hope that makes sense. If it doesn't, ask some questions for sure, because that is very important. But yeah, a lot of times people like to have their first constructor grabbing metal, their second constructor assists the lab, and their third one to build energy. And if you do it that way, your commander might need to build some more energy while he's at home. Just keep a watch over your energy, and if you need it, build some more wins type of thing. So a little bit of adaptation is good. But yeah, you got some blitzes out now. Also, if you're in a pinch for energy for some reason, certain things like these crystals or trees or mushrooms have a bit of resources in them. Trees generally only have energy. Crystals generally only have energy, but sometimes have metal. So if they have metal, it's like really important to reclaim it with your builders. So to do that, you just click on your vehicle, hit E to bring up the reclaim thing, and then you just drag your mouse to reclaim an area. You can also reclaim your own things for 100% return. So it's a way to like sell your structures or units or whatever it is if you don't want them anymore. Which is really good to do for things like solar, by the way, because solar costs a ton of metal and doesn't produce that much energy for how much metal it costs. Not that you have solar, but just to mention it. It does not return energy, by the way, it only returns metal. So anyways, moving on, you got to the front here. Oh, you see a commander, you move back a little bit, take out a guy. Yeah, this is okay. I guess just to point out what could be a little bit better, because this metal extractor's in front of the laser tower, it's pretty easy for the metal extractor to still die in this situation if units attack the location. You could put the excuse me, you could put the light laser tower, say like out here somewhere, and it protects this metal extractor a little bit better. But yeah, it looks like you are pushing your towers forward. I would also argue, yeah, I mean around here is where you'd want a radar anyways, but especially since you've met the enemy, you want to have a radar ASAP so you know how much stuff he actually has here. Because as it is, you just see a few things, and luckily you do have some radar coverage, so you do see some dots here, but otherwise it's pretty much in the dark, which of course not ideal. So it looks like he's going to come forward in D-gun probably. Oh, he's a 33 too, so yeah, this is going to be a little bit rough. Actually, yeah, I'm just looking now at the players in this room. This is like a smattering of across the board of like all these different levels of players. So yeah, this is going to be a rough one for you because the blue color is basically always their best player. Sometimes the numbers get a little fudged with the colors. In this case, the The purple players actually got the highest TS, which is this number here. Or actually, it's sorry, it's open skill now. It's not TS anymore. It's OS. Um, but yeah, that's an indicator of their like rating at the moment. The icons, by the way, are they correspond to the rating, but it plays it has to do with the leaderboard more. Excuse me, I think just got like something in my throat. But anyways, um, yeah, your two best players, or well, your two best players are Neto and Enzio, which is orange. But yeah, you're facing off their, the second or third highest player in this room, which is a long ways away from some of these other players in here. So it's going to be kind of hard for you. Um, yeah. So here, yeah, ideally you'd keep building laser towers here. Not that laser towers are like fantastic against like hordes of of enemy units or anything like that. Um, they're actually quite weak, but they make it they kind of zone the area so that it's harder for your opponent to just push in and just keep walking forward. Um, it basically taxes them for pushing forward. Like, look, you need to pay attention and attack this correctly instead of just walking around. So it just forces a little bit more APM, and it's also assuming you have some units that also back it up, adds a bit of extra DPS that helps out a lot if you're defending, especially this early on. All right, so you got plenty of blitzes here. Plenty of blitzes. Okay, so all in on blitzes it looks like. So arguably, and yeah, by this time you should definitely have a radar to see over here as well. Um, but yeah, so I'll break down the units a little bit for you for Armada vehicle. Um, so first of all, you have your scout, right? That's just, very cheap, very fast, has the most line of sight out of any of these units. So it's great at scouting and seeing things and running away from things that are slow. Uh, and it can also take out mexes pretty quickly, as you saw at your base, and I'm sure you know that already. Um, so they're great at picking off stuff that is completely naked, and also getting information, um, and also dealing with other scouts if they're at your base or something like that. Blitzes are, they're more expensive. They're still pretty fast. They're not quite as fast as the rover, and they have some pretty good DPS, but they do die rather quickly compared to some of these other tanks. But they are more or less a raiding unit, which means they're great for running through somewhere and taking out chunks of someone's base if it's not defended properly. But they are not very good in an actual fight. Um, oh, you actually just switched over to shell shockers. Um, but moving on, yeah, you have your artillery, which is great against static defenses. They also make it annoying so that your opponent has to keep moving, because if they don't keep moving, then the artillery just kind of shell at them and they take a lot of extra damage. Whistlers, they have some nice range. They're not quite as much as the shell shocker, but it's like significant. Let's actually look at it. 575 range. Shell shocker is 710. Um, so yeah, it's more range than say like the stout and the Janus and the blitz, but it's less than the shell shocker. And they also have very, very low DPS. DPS only 19. Um, but the thing is, they have the range and it's direct fires, so like they can deal bits of damage over a long period of time from quite the distance. And they also have more line of sight than the other tanks and stuff do, just not more than the rover. So they're quite nice for some additional line of sight, and they're quite nice because they do bits of damage over a long range. Um, they also can hit air, unlike everything else. They're the one anti-air vehicle here, so they do a little bit of everything essentially. Um, put it back on your view. What? I said your view. There we go. Okay, why does it keep changing? Oh, I think I rested my hand on the keyboard by accident. Um, anyways, your main bread and butter unit for like absorbing damage, like it's basically your tanky unit, is the tank, the medium assault tank. Um, So I would say the Whistler's your anti-air slash like general all-purpose, like all rounds. Like it kind of does okay with stuff, but it is quite slow, so it's terrible at stuff like raiding. Shell Shockers are good against static defense. They barrage stuff from a distance. But then you have your main battle kind of units, your assault units, which is mainly the Stout in case of the Armada, um, or it's the other medium tank. I forget what it's called actually for the Cortex. But anyways, they can absorb a lot of damage. They're a little bit closer range, and they can just take a lot of hits for other units. Janus doesn't take quite as many hits as the Stout and has shorter range, but it does high amounts of damage, and it takes a long time to reload. So it's a good unit for like, it runs in and fires its shots and then runs back out. And then you have your amphibious tank, which, for lands you don't want it. The only reason you'd ever want that unit is if you're trying to traverse untraversable water. Put the traversable thing on. So yeah, regular tanks can actually go through here anyway, so you wouldn't even want it for this. It's very map specific in a way. But yeah, it's more just, oh, surprise, I got amphibious units coming up, from the water. Um, but yeah, they like, balance wise, they're not as great as having a medium tank in terms of frontline stuff. Um, and then you have an amphibious constructor, but anyways, oh, and the mine layer, I guess. The mine layer is quite nice as well. But I'm not going to talk about that too much. Let's keep it pretty simple here. Wait, something? Oh no, you finally just built that on the radar. Okay, so what I was going to say is you're producing a lot of blitzes, and these blitzes um, can do things like run around this way, or even, so can they go in here? Yeah, I think they can go in here. Um, just send them through this way, and maybe you can get to their base and stuff. And that's what they're really good for is because they're a little bit faster, and they're really good against scouts, the only unit that is faster. They can do moves like that, and then the army that blue has can't really get back in time to defend it. So they can do things like that. They're not going to be great later on in terms of like a frontal battle with blue's tanks. Now blue's kind of got the same thing. It's got a lot of incisors here. Um, early on in the game, it's good to have blitzes to hold the front because they can get there sooner. They can get there sooner, and they're cheaper, so that you can have a lot of them just like, to occupy the space, so it's harder for an opponent to run through with scouts and stuff like that. But once you have a few, I would recommend getting things like stouts for the actual battle. And then Shell Shocker is going to be nice here as well, so I like that. A couple of Januses as well. Yeah, pretty much just at this point I would trade out some of these blitzes for some stouts instead. Okay, so he chooses to go for this twin guard, which is basically two light laser towers on top of each other, and one has slightly more range. So that's allowing him to take out all your light laser towers that are on this edge, basically for free, so nice move by him. And now you have an artillery out. The artillery, whoa. Oh, he has artillery too, it looks like. But yeah, your artillery could attack the twin guard. But yeah, ideally just like attacking the area. Yeah, I don't know if you meant to click on the commander to attack it, but the commander does have a lot of health. One shell shocker's not really going to take it down. So I would prioritize other things instead. But yeah, you wisely pull back a bit. Now you have a second shell shocker out. So yeah, at this point, looking back at your economy, you don't have anything assisting this lab. And so the lab's only using that 100 build power to build. And so since you just don't have a lot of expenditure, you're adding on these wind turbines, which is pretty cheap. You're adding on some more metal, which is great. You should be doing that. Ideally a little bit sooner, like I was saying before. But because you don't you basically don't have enough build power to spend the resources that you have. And unspent resources are basically, just sitting there not doing anything, waiting to be used. So if you had spent this metal and energy, um, by having more build power on this lab, you would have a lot more units to contest what blue has. So blue just has more because he's probably spent his metal a lot better. Um, and I look at that and it's like not that great either, but I don't know. He'll spend it eventually. But yeah, you could have a lot more units. In fact, if you had spent all your metal and blue's barge still looked like this, uh, you'd probably have enough to actually take out this position instead of the other way around. Um, but yeah, so in terms of build power, early on you have basically two choices. You can either add on more constructors, and the constructors themselves can assist the lab. Notes constructors also provide plus 10 energy. You can see at the bottom here, it's plus 10 energy per second. That's just like for being alive. I like to think it has like a little ATG or something like that in it, and it's just like producing this little bit that can be used elsewhere somehow, or I don't know. But anyways, so yeah, they only have 90 build power. They produce a little bit of energy, and they're mobile, right? So like if you get a bunch of constructors, you can eventually use them for other things. Say enemies slipped by on the bottom here and took this stuff out. Well, now you need another constructor to do it. So you can just grab one and start doing that right away. So it's kind of nice having constructors like that early on. I personally prefer that method. But the other method is to eventually produce construction turrets. And actually, when I say that the constructors is my method, like eventually when I have like 4 constructors or so like assisting the lab, I'll tell all 4 of those constructors to build some construction turrets. Now, commanders cannot build construction turrets, but any tier 1 bots can. Or not necessarily bots, it could be a vehicle or aircraft or whatever. But they can all build what some people call a nano. Where's my builds panel? The heck? Okay, I don't know what happens to my UI, but apparently it's not showing up. But basically, it is on the production tab. You hit V. Wait, does it automatically just go to that? Oh, okay. I don't remember that. I remember it going to a bot lab if I did that. But anyways, it would be V and then A to build this construction or nano, whatever people call it. You don't want to build a ton at once, but add them on slowly because they do have a lot of build power themselves. They have 200 build power, and they'll assist anything within a certain ring, and that's their like zone of operation. So ideally, you'd place some like around here somewhere, not necessarily right next to your factory, but like somewhere centralized or somewhere where you're going to be also building some buildings as well, because then it can assist. You can choose like, oh, I want this building to be built really quickly, or you can say I want to build units very quickly, and just kind of manage it however you want. But yeah, for the cost, they're very, very good. They only cost 210 metal, whereas these constructors, well, we don't have the, I don't know why I can't see the panel, but I forget what a constructor actually we can just look at it this way. It's 135 metal to produce a T1 Armada vehicle constructor. So yeah, pick and choose between those, or ideally actually a mix of both. But I would recommend more constructors early on a map like this, where you can get your metals sooner by having more, and then you can just tell them to go back to the factory afterwards. But that would help spend your resources quicker, essentially. And then at a certain point, I'll also mention that if you put enough build power and you have enough resources, these units will crank out quite quickly. But you'll notice that like how fast a unit is produced is hindered greatly at that time by how long it takes for it to exit the lab. So every time a unit's produced, oh, it's going to be a minute before that's produced. but every time it's produced, it takes, like a second or two to exit the lab. And that whole time, all the build power that's helping the lab, including the lab itself, is not, uh, it's not being spent. So there is a certain point when it makes more sense to build a second lab instead of adding more build power to your first. But generally speaking, it is better to add build power to your first lab. I hope that clears all that up. Um, that is a very bar specific thing. So yeah, you're dealing with blue quite well. Like, you pulled back when you needed to. But yeah, again, if some of these were stouts instead, I think you'd have a bit of an easier time. And if you had spent your metal, this would be an easier time here. Yeah, I hope I'm saying everything very clearly. Again, this video is geared up for somebody that hasn't played before, essentially. I know you're week in. I don't really know how much experience you've gotten in that week, but honestly, like, you have some basics down. Not bad for someone that's not played RTS. So, for me, I've been playing RTS my whole life, so I have a pretty strong understanding of tactics and how to do stuff. And I've been playing Total Annihilation basically my whole life, so I have a good sense of how the resources and things work. So this becomes kind of unfortunate because he just has so much more. These pounders are a big deal. They can hurt a lot. They're basically the Cortex version of the Janus. They're shorter range than the Janus, and they shoot faster, but they do less actual damage. So here, especially when you get pushed back so hard, you want to spend more of your build power, more of your resources on the vehicle lab to produce as quickly as possible and just crank out units. I'd also consider putting up a radar since you lost yours to regain some of that knowledge of the fog. Blue's in a very good position against you. Yeah, so this is quite good. Generally, like, the idea is really good. You don't quite have enough units to actually do this, but if you did, like, all of a sudden rushing in there with all your units, and you did it at a good angle. So Blue's whole army is, like, in this section, right? You do not want to go in this way. Do not go straight into it like that. You want to go in from the angle like you did, and hit the line like at its point, and that'll just put, you'll basically have more units attacking one of his units, and he'll only have like 2 or 3 units attacking your entire group because they are so spread out. So that is very ideal. I don't know if that was intentional or not, but I thought I'd give you some kudos. But yeah, just not quite enough. Those pounders do quite well against blitzes. Yeah. Let's see. More blitzes. Oof. Yeah. I don't mind that you went blitz here. Because you just want units out. To fight whatever he has. And it's going to be harder to produce things like medium tanks to deal with this. I would not recommend doing something like Janus. I do not recommend, artillery. You want some like brawly kind of units. And Blitz is an okay choice, but ideally you would want medium tanks. Oh, they're called brutes. That's what the Cortex version is called. I just realized. But yeah, ideally you'd want to mass up a bunch of medium tanks and then go in. And Blue, being, as high of an OS as he is, did that himself. And he took a nice position here. He saw this, took this out, and instead of just like rushing into your base, he was very patient, built up his medium tank line, and now all of a sudden, you know, he doesn't, or you don't have the forces to contest as much as he has. Whereas if he had rushed in, like you know, his units could have gotten degunned a lot easier. Um, you know, it would have been a lot riskier. So he's being very patient with it, and that's generally what you'd want to do in his situation. But yeah, very rough in your position, especially when they don't make a mistake like that. You know, I'm saying that he did not make a mistake, just to clarify. Yeah, I mean, that might work in like a lower end lobby, but against someone like Blue, it's not going to, because he will just pull back like that. And yeah, unfortunately, that just means your commander's dead. You didn't really get any kills with it. One of the things you can do, if you have the energy for it, in this case you do not, but if you did, your commander has the ability to cloak. So to cloak your commander, you select it and hit K. Now a cloak commander that is standing still, it costs 100 energy per second. So this 263 would go up to minus 363, which is quite a lot, you know, in your case. You know, you only have 226 coming in right now, so you would not be able to afford it, and it would just automatically turn off. So it'd be a waste of money. But say you did have more energy, you could do that. So yeah, a cloaked commander standing still costs 100 energy per second. A cloaked commander moving costs 1000 energy per second. So it's very important you do not move, because if you do, your energy would drain, and you certainly, you know, at this point in the game, you're not going to have 1000 energy income that's not being spent, you know, some spent somewhere. Like that's more like when you have tier 2 economy and stuff like that. I'm going to take it off your vision just to see what other people are making. Yeah, so these guys down here, teal and purple, they both have 700 and some energy per second, and that's still not enough for Commander Cloak, especially if you're also building other stuff. So, you know, just keep that in mind that you do not want to move. But if you are cloaked, you can stand somewhere, you know, where the enemy is going to run into your commander, and then just start using the disintegration gun, assuming that you have the energy for that as well. If you don't, you know, you can decloak or self-detonate and kill as much as you can that way. It just take out a lot more of his units in that case. Oh, I was also going to mention that a cloaked commander is not a stealth commander. Stealth and cloak are two different things. So cloak is like visible. You know, is it visible to the enemy? Like, you know, if there's a cloaked unit here, you would have no idea. It would just be completely empty. When it comes to stealth, stealth means it does not show up on radar. So something that is cloaked can show up on radar if it's not stealth. And something that's stealth will not show up on radar, but can be seen with the naked eye, type of thing. So just know that if you do that with your commander in cloak, and your opponent has a radar nearby, they will still see a dot, you know, and the dot wobbles around a bit. So like it won't be a perfectly accurate thing, but they might know that there's a commander or something there. You know, and it will get shot at too. Just, you know, so keep all that in mind. It would only really work if there was no radar, and he does have a radar, so that wouldn't really work here either. Blue being the good player that they are. But yeah, I hope that cleared anything up. If you had any questions on that. But yeah, at this point you're just flat out dead. You don't have a commander to degun these. The commander was maybe the one thing that could save you here, but Blue played it very carefully, and this is how it turned out. So I hope all that makes sense. If you have any additional questions, you know, of course ask. I definitely have quite a bit of information and stuff, and I hope I didn't like go into too much detail. You know, I want it to be detailed so that you understand, but I don't want to, you know, water it down a ton or anything either. So yeah, I hope you learned something, and yeah, feel free to ask questions. Thanks for watching.